So there are basically two camps. Some say you can drink alcohol in moderation, while others say you shouldn't drink at all. In this video, as a doctor, I'll explain from a scientific and practical perspective how alcohol affects the body and whether it's really that harmful. Be sure to watch this video until the end to find out how much alcohol you can drink without harming your health. So, what changes occur in the body when you consume alcohol? The first and most serious change is dehydration. What does that mean? Alcohol has a very strong diuretic effect. So, think about it. When you drink beer, wine, whiskey, tequila, whatever, you start going to the bathroom much more often. If you remember a situation where you're at a party and every 10 or 15 minutes you're running to the bathroom, give this video a like and let's keep going. What is a diuretic effect? A diuretic effect means your body becomes dehydrated, and first and foremost, it affects the neurons in your brain. This is very important. Remember that feeling when you've had too much to drink at a party and in the morning you have a terrible hangover? And you just want to drink a huge amount, not just water, but something like pickle brine. And why specifically pickle brine? Because during dehydration, alcohol also disrupts the so-called sodium-potassium pumps. This is essentially the heart of the cell. In other words, our cell is built in the image and likeness of our own body. Our cell has this heart, a heart that pumps. It's called the sodium-potassium pump. And when there's an imbalance, it simply pumps fluid out of the cell. And what happens to the cell? It dies. And the first to die are the neurons in the brain. This process works in such a specific way that, little by little, a person's internal decision-making system gradually changes.
Oh my God! What the
Recent studies from 2022 show that even a single use of alcohol causes the death of neurons in their cradle. That is, we have this subventricular zone where stem cells are located, which produce neurons. This process is called neurogenesis. Alcohol hits right there, at the most important place, where our neurons are born so that we can think and develop as human beings, right? So that there could be evolutionary development. And what happens then? These neural connections are broken. A person falls into a kind of trap. Their prefrontal cortex, our analytical center, works poorly, while the area responsible for desires and fears, our base instincts, the amygdala, works very well. That's where all of this is located. This is a more ancient structure of the brain, and the person thinks, oh, come on, what's the big deal? I'll just have a little drink, it's nothing, at least I'll feel a bit more cheerful. Right now, people might immediately start commenting, how can that be? The French drink, the Spanish drink, the Caucasus drinks, everything is fine with them, they are long-lived. But let's try this. Maybe someone knows some Spaniards, French people, or people from the Caucasus who don't drink, and see how much longer their lives are as a result. What happens with the Spaniards, French, and people from the Caucasus, I call a system of hypercompensation. So for example, a person in Spain, what am I getting at? They have siesta, they always take breaks there, right? They always work without putting in too much effort. They don't have to deal with harsh winters, constant stress, or things like not having enough money or other such problems. Because in any case, they'll be lying there under a palm tree, eating some fruits and vegetables, and everything is fine for them. So, in other words, their quality of life is really well covered from other angles. So you have to understand that, for example, the peoples of the Caucasus, Spaniards and French, they genetically, because they've been drinking heavily for a very long time, generation after generation, for tens of thousands of years, they produce a lot of the same enzyme, alcohol dehydrogenase. And accordingly, they have enough of it to fully break down alcohol and remove it from the body. And by the way, speaking of Spaniards and French people, they actually drink water along with alcohol. They don't make that mistake of getting dehydrated. So they have good fermentation, everything around them is fine, there's hypercompensation thanks to the climate and the food. They have a very good elimination system, a system for breaking down alcohol. And here's an example for you. When I was working in Germany, I had a Chinese friend named Django. I used to go to a lot of Chinese community parties. There would be about 20 of them, and for those 20 people, they'd get a single bottle of whiskey. They each drink just a little, and they're completely wasted. And why is that? Because genetically their ancestors didn't drink alcohol, so they produce very little of that enzyme, alcohol dehydrogenase. Third point, what else does alcohol negatively affect? Alcohol changes the composition of the microbiota in our gut. Our body has about 30 to 40 trillion cells. And in our gut there live just as many, if not significantly more, bacteria than all the individual cells in our entire body combined. So 30 to 40 trillion bacteria, what we call the gut microbiome, live in our body. And so studies from recent years, by the way, I often talk about this on my Telegram channel. I leave a link to it in the video description. What does alcohol do? Alcohol causes oxidative stress for these very microbes. And this widespread myth that when you drink alcohol, you're disinfecting yourself. People even write, get drunk, it's good for you. So there are basically, it causes burns, leads to the death and alteration of the gut microbiota, shifting it toward pathogenic or conditionally pathogenic microflora. We are not what we eat, but what we absorb. And absorption happens only thanks to the symbiotic microflora. If pathogenic and conditionally pathogenic microflora dominate and alcohol creates conditions for the growth of this pathogenic microflora. By the way, alcohol also contains a huge amount of various sugars that feed all these fungal infections, like Candida, for example. And it turns out that pathogenic or conditionally pathogenic microflora also synthesize various substances. And these substances are toxic to our body, meaning they are absorbed by our system, and that's when you start experiencing things like headaches, chronic fatigue, and so on. And by the way, in 2010, a paper by British scientists was published in the Lancet journal. Of course, British scientists, as usual, discovered that in terms of harm to oneself and others, alcohol ranks first. Alcohol ranks first among all narcotic substances.
Holy shit!
So first, alcohol has been equated with narcotics since 2010. And second, it holds first place in terms of harm to oneself and to others. How many crimes, right? How many stabbings? All sorts of things happen. Shootings, stabbings, and more. And how many people crash while driving under the influence of alcohol? It's just impossible to count how many people there are. As someone who worked for a long time in emergency surgery and emergency traumatology, I've seen enough of these drunk fools who just destroyed themselves, right? And it's one thing if they only hurt themselves, but they also dragged other people down with them. That's an even bigger problem. And fourth, another effect of alcohol is the sharp decrease in some of our most important defenders, T lymphocytes. That is, alcohol affects, there are also scientific studies on this, that alcohol very sharply reduces the size of the thymus, the gland located right here under the sternum. When a person is born, their thymus is actually huge. The thymus gland is enormous, and gradually, little by little, it shrinks with age. This is because the number of T lymphocytes, since the thymus is the cradle of T lymphocytes, the place where they are produced, decreases over time. We have T and B lymphocytes. Now, T lymphocytes are the coolest, most highly specialized cells of the immune system. You could compare them to special forces soldiers, like, I don't know, Mossad or GRU operatives. There are all sorts of other units running around too, like penal battalions. Our immune system has just about everything. So it turns out that chronic consumption, even what seems like a small amount of alcohol, like a beer or a glass of wine every evening, leads to a reduction, a shrinking of this organ, and a decrease in the production of those very T lymphocytes that are absolutely vital for protecting all our organs and systems. And we live in a micro world. There are a huge number of microorganisms around us that are constantly entering our bodies, constantly interacting with us. And if your defense systems are compromised, like your alarm system isn't working, the cameras are broken, the drones have stopped flying properly, the fighter jets don't take off on time, the air defense system isn't functioning, right? So these specialized and highly efficient T lymphocytes can be likened to the sophisticated operations of a supercomputer that constantly scans and meticulously monitors the vast borders of your entire body. And just imagine, you simply don't have them. They've all been knocked out. Alcohol specifically targets the place where these drones are assembled, where the assembly of these highly specific, high-quality defense systems of our body takes place. A huge number of diseases arise because of what is called immunodeficiency. And now, as promised, how much can you drink? None at all.